Okay. Hi, Facebook. I think that we're live here.
Is there a way to see it?
We're going to see, because it looks like it's live up there. Oh, hi, Facebook. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Libby Cunningham with WCPO.com, joined here by IT investigator Hillary Lake.
Yeah.
As you can see at the beginning, making sure we had a connection. So we are talking today about drug myths.
Right.
And it's a story that you have airing tonight at 11.
Tonight at 11, yeah, on WCPO.
So,
and there's already a web story up on WCPO.com.
And so you can take a look at the story online, but also what I'd love for you guys to do is just leave a message in the comments letting us know where you're watching from and any types of questions that you might have about the story, because it's really pretty interesting. Yeah,
the story is focusing on rumors or myths that are floating around out there, specifically about opiate use. And do you want me to tell why we started working on this?
This is interesting to me because I remember the early talks about this story. Mm-hmm. Why did you start with this story?
So initially we got a tip that there were large, quote, Narcan parties going on, and Narcan is the brand name for naloxone, which is the revival drug for people who have overdosed on opiates. And so there was a rumor going around actually throughout some law enforcement agencies that large-scale Narcan parties were happening all across the tri-state. And so initially we started looking into that. Well, we went to the Newtown police chief, Tom Synan, who is also a member of the Hamilton County Heroin Coalition Task Force. That's a mouthful. And I asked him about the Narcan parties, and he said, absolutely not. And actually, there is no evidence that Narcan parties are happening anywhere in the United States. So there are not these like large-scale house parties happening where people are bringing all of their drugs and shooting up and getting high and overdosing with the sole purpose of being Narcaned and experiencing what it's like to be revived. That's not happening.
Did he say anything about why rumors like this get started? Because that sounds, sometimes you always think maybe there's a little bit of truth to a rumor, but that sounds really pretty far-fetched.
So the way that rumor probably got started, and this is not, he doesn't know how that rumor got started, but we also went and talked to an addiction specialist, a doctor who actually runs a treatment clinic here in Cincinnati, and he'll be in the story tonight as well. But he told me that sometimes when somebody comes in for treatment, if they're not ready to start treatment yet, or even if they have started treatment but they feel like they're going to use, doctors will sometimes tell people, all right, if you're going to use, do it with people you know, don't do it with strangers, and make sure you have Narcan on hand. That's very different than somebody having a house party where everybody's getting high and then reviving each other.
Yes.
Very different.
And so we have people here watching from Coleraine. Hi, Angela. Hi, Tommy. Hi,
Hi
Brandy. From Brittany from Florence. Oh, Brandy, you're from Loveland. And we do have a Brittany from Florence. Summer. If any of you have any questions for Hillary about tonight's story, she's here to answer them.
Right, and I'll go through a couple of the other myths. I don't want to give everything away right here, but a couple of the other myths, one of them has to do with in order for somebody to be able to become a recovering addict, to go through recovery, to be successful at that detox is all it takes. The addiction specialist that we spoke with says that's absolutely not true for a majority of people, and that's why you hear sometimes about people having to go through rehab 2, 3, 4 times. If you only go through the detox portion, which is generally about a week, takes about a week to get it all out of your system. If you leave rehab after that point, or if you only do a 1-week detox on your own, let's say, the chances of you going back out and doing drugs again are very, very high, in part because you haven't had the therapy and the counseling that comes with it, but also your system is just so much more vulnerable to the drugs because you've been doing drugs all this time, and then you detox for a week, and then it's like your immune system is down, kind of. Then that's just an analogy, but it makes it so that the next time you do drugs, it takes less for you to get high, but you experience it. Yeah, you experience it in a much more powerful way.
And detox is a pretty painful thing, right?
Oh yeah, we talked to a recovering addict. Actually, her 1-year sober date was a few days ago, and I said, "Tell me what it feels like to go through detox and to get yourself through that first week to a point where you can continue your treatment." And she told me it is the worst feeling. She said, "You literally feel like you want to die. You feel you just sick." I'm not sure, and I'm not a doctor, so I don't. And I didn't ask that question, so I don't want to give an answer to it. But she told me it's horrible. Chief Synan, Police Chief Synan with Newtown Police, he told me that he said, "I don't know of anybody," and actually Dr. Ryan, who we spoke with also, who's the treatment specialist, all three of them said that nobody gets high for the feeling, for that feeling, for the sick feeling.
Yeah.
And so if you've heard the word being dope sick, that's when you're sick and you need drugs. And if you're still an addict, you're going out and you're doing whatever you can do to get drugs and put them back in your system to make that sick feeling go away, because it's absolutely horrible from what all three of them have told me.
And so we have a question here from Jason Francis. And Jason, I don't know if this is something we can answer right now, but I do know that there are going to be some county discussions about this. Do we know anything about Narcan numbers in the county, or who's paying for it? Because you can purchase Narcan.
You can purchase Narcan. What I can tell you is, and I'm going to be guessing a little bit on the number here, but I believe that Hamilton County, the Hamilton County Heroin Coalition Task Force that Chief Synan is on, they just got a grant, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago, and it's like a $2 million grant.
Oh, wow.
And I forget who the grant is from, but they got this significant grant, and that is what is covering the Narcan in Hamilton County for right now. We have done stories. It's been I don't know, a good 6 or 9 months probably since we've done a story where we have looked at which counties are using the most and how much money they're spending on them. So that is definitely a good thing for us maybe to go back and do a follow-up on, an update on. So who was that, Justin?
That was
Jason. Sorry, yeah. Jason. So Jason, thank you for raising that question, and I will bring it to our assistant news director's attention, and maybe we can make some calls on that and do something as a day turn story coming up. The one thing with that, though, is that sometimes the law enforcement agencies don't necessarily have those numbers handy, so it might take them a couple of days to get the data for us so that we can then pass it on to you.
Thank you, Jason. So I had a question for you. So you've covered the opioid epidemic a lot. Is there one thing that you keep hearing, or one thing that really keeps striking you that you're hearing from officials and those in recovery? It's just really striking.
I wouldn't say that I'm hearing anything from people that is really striking. I think the thing that, Chief Synan told me last week, or 2 weeks ago when we interviewed him for this story, he said, what is happening now in terms of the number of people who are overdosing and the number of people who are overdosing to death, they're not being revived. Some people do survive when they receive Narcan or naloxone. He said what's happening now is predictable and it's preventable.
Oh, wow.
Because it's been happening for so long, the numbers keep going up. We know what's happening. We know why it's happening. Yet there aren't a lot of mechanisms in place yet to make it stop.
Wow. And, you know, if you're joining us here now today, at 11 p.m., Hillary Lake has a story, and we have a story on WCPO.com right now about different drug myths that we're hearing. So we're just taking a look at your questions now. This
comment from Sherry, she says, dope sick is very real. The only chance is God. That is probably the best way that I've ever heard it described. Like I said, it is not a fun experience for people going through it. So
let's see here. Renee.
Jason has another. So Jason is asking, does the grant set treatment programs, or is it just for the Narcan? My understanding, Jason, is that it's just for the Narcan. So there is a large stockpile of of Narcan that is here in Hamilton County that is being distributed among the law enforcement and fire agencies that are using it. And I believe it's most everyone in Hamilton County. The only agency that I know for sure that is not using Narcan or that it does not have its deputies is in Butler County, in Butler County Sheriff's Office. The Butler County Sheriff has been very, very, very vocal about not supplying his deputies with Narcan and why he's making that choice.
And we're seeing here too, is there treatment for those without health insurance? Were they able to talk about anything about that for this story in particular, or is this something they might have to?
No, that is a very tough question to answer. One of the things that came up that we didn't focus on in this story, but it did come up in the interview that I did with Chief Synan, was he believes that the way this epidemic is shaping out now and the demographic that it hit initially and where it's moving, that it is a clear indicator of who had health insurance at one point and who did not.
Interesting.
Because a lot of the people who are addicted now either had prescription availability to them at one point, and then for whatever reason they didn't have it anymore, so then you go out searching for pills. It's that kind of cycle. And so he says that if you take a really hard look at the epidemic and where things are now, that in his eyes and knowing the facts that he knows, it is clear who had health insurance and who didn't. But in terms of for treatment, I don't believe a lot of health insurances cover treatment, and I think that's true. That would be true no matter what your socioeconomic status is, what demographic you fall into.
And speaking of treatments, we get a lot of questions here on Facebook. You know, I go through our Facebook comments, almost all of them every single day. From some people, when we refer to addiction as a disease, some people say, you know, they do not view it that way. Is that something that you have heard it described to you by medical professionals?
Yeah, every medical professional I've ever talked to, and I would say 99.9% of law enforcement and firefighters who I've talked to about this, and 100% of the addicts who I've talked to about this, will all say that addiction is a disease. It is scientifically proven to be a disease, and the people who get addicted to drugs could have just as easily gotten addicted to alcohol, food, sugar, gambling, any number of things. But the drugs was what did it. So if you're susceptible to addiction, it doesn't necessarily matter what you're going to be addicted to. That's just sort of the mechanism. Sure. But the problem, there is a greater problem within us.
And that's something actually right here before we end, Alicia is saying, when you spoke to someone at Brightview, correct?
I did.
Did they speak anything or say anything about mental health services? They go hand in hand sometimes when you're dealing with treating addiction.
So actually, the recovering addict who we talked to for our story, her name is Stephanie Schaffner, tonight, and she's 1 year clean. She was a crystal meth user and heroin user. By the end, she was getting fentanyl in her heroin and didn't know it till she went into detox, and it was still in her system, and fentanyl takes a really long time to get out of your system. She used for 8 years without her family knowing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she said that with the way her treatment is going now, the mental health component is a big part of it. And for her, she actually has gone through treatment at Brightview here in Cincinnati, but she's also doing a sort of supplemental, and I forget what the name of the program is because we didn't profile it in this story, but she mentioned to me that she's also going to some other group that meets like on Sundays where she lives up in Mason. Okay. So she's kind of supplementing the Brightview program with this other
kind of method.
Yeah.
That's something. Well, thank you all for joining us. Hillary's story airs tonight at 11 p.m. on Not On Your Side.
I was just going to say we'll be going over the top three, the three big rumors or three big myths about opiate use that are out there, and we'll be telling you if they are fact or fiction, and explaining a little bit more about why these rumors are so problematic to the current epidemic.
It's really pretty interesting too, so you're definitely going to want to see it. There's also a story on our website. She worked visual reporter Lisa Bernard-Coons.
Yes, worked on this with her.
If you want to see, and she's been covering the epidemic as well, if you want to see just a little bit more of background on this, it really is interesting because like you said, the myth about Narcan parties, that Tom Sinon's saying that they don't happen.
Right.
So they started from something so small, kind of like a game of telephone.
Right.
So if you guys please join us, I'm going to hop up here and turn off the Facebook Live, and we will try to get into the comments and leave some links.
Yep.
Thank you guys so much for watching.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.